On that note, welcome back to Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Last time...
Oh, yes, Malfoy was very vague, asking if
Yep.
they were going to enter it.
And
the thing that they need the dress robes for. It.
And Charlie and Mrs. Weasley were like, have fun. And Charlie was like, maybe I'll see you at Hogwarts.
Oh, yes, everyone knows about what's going on, except Ron, Harry, and Hermione, it seems.
Yes. And
everyone's in on it.
And Malfoy was like, oh, what? Your parents didn't tell you? Maybe they're not high up enough in the ministry to know. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Usual Malfoy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just putting down the Weasleys for being Weasleys.
Yep. For being poor. Yep. That was pretty much the chapter.
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Hopefully Charlie gets one of his dragons to eat Malfoy.
Chapter 12. The Triwizard Tournament. Through the gates, flanked with the statues of winged boars, and up the sweeping drive the carriages trundled, swaying dangerously in what was fast becoming a gale. Leaning against the window, Harry could see Hogwarts coming nearer, its many lighted windows blurred and shimmering behind the thick curtain of rain. Lightning flashed across the sky as their carriage came to a halt before the great oak front doors, which stood at the top of a flight of stone steps. People who had occupied the carriages in front were already hurrying up the stone steps onto the castle. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville jumped down from their carriage and dashed up the steps too, looking up only when they were safely inside the cavernous, torchlit entrance hall with its magnificent marble staircase. "Blimey," said Ron, shaking his head and sending water everywhere. "That keeps up, the lake's going to overflow. I'm soaking. Ah!" A large, red, water-filled balloon had dropped out of the ceiling onto Ron's head and exploded. Drenched and spluttering, Ron staggered sideways into Harry just as a second water bomb dropped, narrowly missing Hermione. It burst at Harry's feet, sending a wave of cold water over his trainers and into his socks. People all around them shrieked and started pushing each other in their efforts to get out of the way of the line of fire. Harry looked up and saw, floating 20 feet above them, Peeves the Poltergeist, a little man in a bell-covered hat and orange bow tie, his wide malicious grin contorted with concentration as he took aim again. "Peeves!" yelled an angry voice. "Peeves, come down here at once!" Professor McGonagall, deputy headmistress and head of Gryffindor House, had come dashing out of the Great Hall. Then she skidded on the wet floor and grabbed Hermione around the neck to stop herself from falling. "Out! Sorry, Miss Granger." "That's all right, Professor," Hermione gasped, massaging her throat. "Peeves, get down here now!" barked Professor McGonagall, straightening her pointed hat and glaring upwards through her square-rimmed spectacles. "Not doing nothing!" cackled Peeves, lobbing a water bomb at several fifth-year girls who screamed and dived into the Great Hall. "Already wet, aren't they? Little squirts! Whee!" And he aimed another bomb at a group of second-years who'd just arrived. "I shall call the headmaster," shouted Professor McGonagall. "I'm warning you, Peeves." Peeves stuck out his tongue, threw the last of his water bombs into the air, and zoomed off up the marble staircase, cackling insanely. "Well then, move along," said Professor McGonagall sharply to the bedraggled crowd. "Into the Great Hall. Come on." Harry, Ron, and Hermione slipped and slid across the entrance hall and through the double doors on the right, Ron muttering furiously under his breath as he pushed his sopping hair off his face. The Great Hall looked its usual splendid self, decorated for the start of term feasts. Golden plates and goblets gleamed by the light of hundreds and hundreds of candles, floating over the tables in mid-air. The 4 long house tables were packed with chattering students. At the top of the hall, the staff sat along one side of a 5th table, facing their pupils. It was much warmer in here. Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked past the Slytherins, the Ravenclaws, and the Hufflepuffs, and sat down with the rest of the Gryffindors at the far side of the hall, next to nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor house ghost. Pearly white and semi-transparent, Nick was dressed tonight in his usual doublet with a particularly large ruff, which served the dual purpose of looking extra festive and ensuring that his neck didn't wobble too much on his partially severed neck. "Good evening," he said, beaming at them. "Says who?" said Harry, taking off his trainers and emptying them of water. "Hope they hurry up with the sorting, I'm starving." The sorting of the new students into houses took place at the start of every school year, but by an unlucky combination of circumstances, Harry hadn't been present at one since his own. He was quite looking forward to it. Just then, a highly excited, breathless voice called down the table. "Hiya, Harry!" It was Colin Creevey, a third year, to whom Harry was something of a hero. "Hi, Colin," said Harry warily. "Harry, guess what? Guess what, Harry? My brother's starting. My brother Dennis." Good," said Harry. "He's really excited," said Colin, practically bouncing up and down in his seat. "I just hope he's in Gryffindor. Keep your fingers crossed, eh, Harry?" All right. Yeah," said Harry. He turned back to Hermione, Ron, and Nearly Headless Nick. "Brothers and sisters usually go in the same houses, don't they?" he said. But he was judging by the Weasleys, all 7 of whom had been put into Gryffindor. "No, not necessarily," said Hermione. "Parvati Patil's twins in Ravenclaw, and they're identical. You'd think they'd be together, wouldn't you?" Harry looked up at the staff table. There seemed to be rather more empty seats than usual. Hagrid, of course, was still fighting his way across the lake with the first years. Professor McGonagall was presumably supervising the drying of the entrance hall. But there was another empty chair too, and he couldn't think who else was missing. "Where's the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher?" said Hermione, who was also looking up at the teacher's table. They'd never yet had a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher who'd lasted more than 3 terms. Harry's favourite by far had been Professor Lupin, who'd resigned last year. He looked up and down the staff table. There was definitely no new face there. "Oh, maybe they couldn't get one," said Hermione, looking anxious. Harry scanned the table more carefully. Tiny little Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, was sitting on a large pile of cushions beside Professor Sprout, the herbology teacher, whose hat was askew over her flyaway grey hair. She was talking to Professor Sinestra of the astronomy department. On Professor Sinestra's other side was the sallow-faced, hooked-nosed, greasy-haired potions master, Snape, Harry's least favourite person at Hogwarts. Harry's loathing of Snape was only matched by Snape's hatred of him, a hatred which had, if possible, intensified last year when Harry had helped Sirius escape right under Snape's overly large nose. Snape and Sirius had been enemies since their school days. On Snape's other side was an empty seat which Harry guessed was Professor McGonagall's. Next to it, and in the very centre of the table, sat Professor Dumbledore, the headmaster, his sweeping silver hair and beard shining in the candlelight, his magnificent deep green robes embroidered with many stars and moons. The tips of Dumbledore's long, thin fingers were together, and he was resting his chin upon them, staring up at the ceiling through his half-moon spectacles as though lost in thought. Harry glanced up at the ceiling too. It was enchanted to look like the sky outside, and he'd never seen it look this stormy. Purple and black clouds were swirling across it, and as another thunderclap sounded outside, a fork of lightning flashed across it. "Oh, hurry up!" Ron moaned beside Harry. "I could eat a hippogriff." The words were no sooner out of his mouth than the doors of the great hall opened, and silence fell. Professor McGonagall was leading a long line of first-years up to the top of the hall. If Harry, Ron, and Hermione were wet, it was nothing to how these first-years looked. They appeared to have swum across the lake rather than been sailing. All of them were shivering with a combination of cold and nerves as they filed along the staff table and came to a halt in a line facing the rest of the school. All of them except the smallest of the lot, a boy with mousy hair, who was wrapped up in what Harry recognised as Hagrid's moleskin overcoat. The coat was so big for him that it looked as though he were draped in a furry black marquee. His small face protruded from over the collar, looking almost painfully excited. When he had lined up with his terrified-looking peers, he caught Colin Creevey's eye, gave a double thumbs-up and mouthed, "I fell in the lake!" He looked positively delighted about it. Professor McGonagall now placed a 3-legged stool on the ground before the first-years, and on top of it an extremely old, dirty, patched wizard's hat. The first-years stared at it, so did everyone else. For a moment there was silence. Then a tear near the brim opened like a wide mouth, and the hat broke into song. No, I'm not singing it.
Yes, you are.
I'm reading it. 1,000 years or more ago, when I was newly sown, there lived 4 wizards of renown whose names are still well known. Bold Gryffindor from Wild Moor, fair Ravenclaw from Glen, sweet Hufflepuff from Valley Broad, shrewd Slytherin from Fen. They shared a wish, a hope, a dream, they hatched a daring plan, to educate young sorcerers, thus Hogwarts School began. Now each of these 4 founders formed their own house for each, did value different virtues in the ones they had to teach. By Gryffindor the bravest were, prized far beyond the rest, for Ravenclaw the cleverest would always be the best. For Hufflepuff hard workers were most worthy of admission, and power-hungry Slytherin loved those of great ambition. While still alive they did divide their favourites from among the throng, yet how to pick the worthy ones when they were dead and gone? 'Twas Gryffindor who found the way, he whipped me off his head. The founders put some brains in me so I could choose instead. Now slip me snug about your ears, I've never yet been wrong. I'll have a look inside your mind and tell you where you belong. The great hall rang with applause as the Sorting Hat finished. That's not the song it sang when it sorted us, said Harry, clapping along with everyone else. Sings a different one every year, said Ron. It's got to be a pretty boring life, hasn't it, being a hat? I suppose it spends all year making up the next one. Professor McGonagall was now unrolling a large scroll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool, she told the first years. When the hat announces your house, you'll go and sit at the appropriate table. Ackerley, Stewart! A boy walked forward, visibly trembling head to foot, picked up the Sorting Hat, put it on, and sat down on the stool. Ravenclaw! Shouted the hat. Stuart Ackerley took off the hat and hurried into a seat at the Ravenclaw table, where everyone was applauding him. Harry caught a glimpse of Cho, the Ravenclaw seeker, cheering Stuart Ackerley as he sat down. For a fleeting moment, Harry had a strange desire to join the Ravenclaw table too. Baddock Malcolm! Slytherin! The table on the other side of the hall erupted with cheers. Harry could see Malfoy clapping as Baddock joined the Slytherins. Harry wondered whether Baddock knew that the Slytherin house had turned out more dark witches and wizards than any other. Fred and George hissed Malcolm Baddock as he sat down. Branstone, Eleanor! Hufflepuff! Caldwell, Owen! Hufflepuff! Creevy, Dennis! Tiny Dennis Creevy staggered forward, tripping over Hagrid's moleskin, just as Hagrid himself sidled into the hall through a door behind the teacher's table. About twice as tall as a normal man, and at least 3 times as broad, Hagrid, with his long, wild, tangled hair and beard, looked slightly alarming. A misleading impression, for Harry, Ron and Hermione knew that Hagrid possessed a very kind nature. He winked at them as he sat down at the end of the staff table and watched Dennis Creevy putting on the Sorting Hat. The rip at the brim opened wide. Gryffindor! The hat shouted. Hagrid clapped along with the Gryffindors as Dennis Creevy, beaming wildly, took off the hat, placed it on the stool, and hurried over to join his brother. Colin, I fell in, he said shrilly, throwing himself into an empty seat. It was brilliant, and something in the water grabbed me and pushed me back in the boat. Cool, said Colin just as excitedly. It was probably the giant squid, Dennis. Wow, said Dennis, as though no one in their wildest dreams could hope for more than being thrown into a storm-tossed, fathoms-deep lake and pushed out of it again by a giant sea monster. Dennis, see that boy down there? The one with the black hair and glasses? See him? Do you know who he is, Dennis? Harry looked away, staring very hard at the Sorting Hat, now sorting Emma Dobbs. The Sorting Hat continued, boys and girls with varying degrees of fright on their faces moving one by one to the 3-legged stool, the line dwindling slowly as Professor McGonagall passed the L's. Oh, hurry up, Ron moaned, massaging his stomach. Now, Ron, the sorting's so much more important than food, said Nearly Headless Nick, as Madly Laura became a Hufflepuff. Course it is if you're dead, snapped Ron. I do hope this year's batch of Gryffindors are up to scratch, said Nearly Headless Nick, applauding as MacDonald Natalie joined the Gryffindor table. We don't want to break our winning streak, do we? Gryffindor had won the Inter-House Championship for the last 3 years in a row. Pritchard, Graham, Slytherin, Quirk, Orla, Ravenclaw, and finally, with Whitby Kevin, Hufflepuff, the sorting ended. McGonagall picked up the hat and the stool and carried them away. About time, said Ron, seizing his knife and fork and looking expectantly at his golden plate. Professor Dumbledore had got to his feet. He was smiling around at all the students, his arms wide open in welcome. I only have 2 words to say to you, he told them, his deep voice echoing around the hall. Tuck in. Hear, hear, said Harry and Ron loudly, as the empty dishes filled magically before their eyes. Nearly Headless Nick watched mournfully as Harry, Ron and Hermione loaded their place. Said Ron, with his mouth full of mashed potato. You're lucky there's a feast at all tonight, you know, said Nearly Headless Nick. There was terrible trouble in the kitchens earlier. What happened? Said Harry through a sizable chunk of steak. Peas, of course, said Nearly Headless Nick, shaking his head, which wobbled dangerously. He pulled his ruff a little higher up on his neck. The usual argument, you know. He wanted to attend the feast. Well, it's quite out of the question. You know what he's like. Utterly uncivilized. Can't see a plate of food without throwing it. We held a ghosts' council. The fat friar was all for giving him the chance, but most wisely, in my opinion, the bloody Baron put his foot down. The Bloody Baron was the Slytherin ghost, a gaunt and silent spectre covered in silver bloodstains. He was the only person at Hogwarts who could really control Peeves. "Yeah, we thought Peeves seemed a little hacked off about something," said Ron darkly. "So what did he do in the kitchens?" "Oh, the usual," said Nearly Headless Nick, shrugging. "Wreaked havoc and mayhem, pots and pans everywhere, place swimming in soup, terrified the house elves out of their wits." Clang. Hermione had knocked over a golden goblet. Pumpkin juice spread steadily over the tablecloth, staining several feet of white linen orange, but Hermione paid no attention. "There are house elves here?" she said, staring, horror-struck at Nearly Headless Nick. "Here at Hogwarts?" "Certainly," said Nearly Headless Nick, looking surprised at her reaction. "Largest number in any dwelling in Britain, I believe. Over 100. "I've never seen one," said Hermione. "Well, they hardly ever leave the kitchen by day, do they?" said Nearly Headless Nick. "They come out at night to do a bit of cleaning, see to the fires and so on. I mean, you're not supposed to see them, are you? That's the mark of a good house elf, isn't it? That you don't know it's there." Hermione stared at him. "But they get paid," she said. "They get holidays, don't they? And sick leave and pensions and everything?" Nearly Headless Nick chortled so much that his ruff slipped and his head flopped off, dangling on the inch or so left of ghostly skin and muscle still attached to his neck. "Sick leave and pensions," he said, pushing his head back onto his shoulders and securing it once more with his ruff. "House elves don't want sick leave and pensions." Hermione looked down at her hardly touched plate of food, then put her knife and fork down upon it and pushed it away from her. "Oh, go on, Hermione," said Ron, accidentally spraying Harry with bits of Yorkshire pudding. "Oh, sorry, Harry." He swallowed. You won't get them sick leave by starving yourself." "Slave labour," said Hermione, breathing hard through her nose. "That's what made this dinner. Slave labour." And she refused to eat another bite. The rain was still drumming heavily outside the dark windows. Another clap of thunder shook the windows, and the stormy ceiling flashed, illuminating the gold plates as the remains of the first course vanished and were replaced instantly with puddings. "Treacle tart, Hermione," said Ron, deliberately wafting its smell toward her. "Spotted Dick, look! Chocolate gâteau!" But Hermione gave him a look so reminiscent of Professor McGonagall that he gave up. When the puddings too had been demolished and the last crumbs had faded off their plates, leaving them sparkling clean, Albus Dumbledore got to his feet again. The buzz of chatter filling the hall ceased almost at once, so that only the howling wind and pounding rain could be heard. "So," said Dumbledore, smiling all around them, "now that we are all fed and watered—" said Hermione, "I must once more ask for your attention while I give out a few notices. Mr. Filch, the caretaker, has asked me to tell you that the list of objects forbidden inside the castle has this year been extended to include screaming yo-yos, fanged frisbees, and ever-bashing boomerangs. The full list comprises some 437 items, I believe, and can be viewed in Mr. Filch's office if anyone would like to check it." The corners of Dumbledore's mouth twitched. He continued, "As ever, I would like to remind you all that the forest on the grounds is out of bounds to students, as is the village of Hogsmeade to all but below third year. It is also my painful duty to inform you that the Inter-House Quidditch Cup will not take place this year." "What?" Harry gasped. He looked round at Fred and George, his fellow members of the Quidditch team. They were mouthing soundlessly at Dumbledore, apparently too appalled to speak. Dumbledore continued, "This is due to an event that will be starting in October and continuing throughout the school year, taking up much of the teachers' time and energy, but I am sure you will all enjoy it immensely. I have great pleasure in announcing this year at Hogwarts—" But at that moment there was a deafening rumble of thunder and the doors to the great hall banged open. A man stood in the doorway, leaning upon a long staff, shrouded in a black travelling coat. Every head in the great hall swiveled toward the stranger, suddenly brightly illuminated by a fork of lightning that flashed across the ceiling. He lowered his hood, shook out a long mane of grizzled grey hair, then began to walk up toward the teacher's table. A dull clunk echoed through the hall on his every other step. He reached the end of the top table, turned right, and limped heavily toward Dumbledore. Another flash of lightning crossed the ceiling. Hermione gasped. The lightning had thrown the man's face into sharp relief, and it was a face unlike anything Harry had ever seen. It looked as though it had been carved out of weathered wood by someone who'd only had the vaguest idea of what human faces were supposed to look like, and was none too skilled with a chisel. Every inch of skin seemed to be scarred. The mouth looked like a diagonal gash, and a large chunk of the nose was missing. But it was the man's eye that made him frightening. One of them was small, dark, and beady. The other was large, round as a coin, and a vivid electric blue. The blue eye was moving ceaselessly, without blinking, and was rolling up and down from side to side, quite independently of the normal eye. And then it rolled right over, pointed into the back of the man's head so that all they could see was the whiteness. The stranger reached Dumbledore. He stretched out a hand that was as badly scarred as his face, and Dumbledore shook it, muttering words Harry couldn't hear. He seemed to be making some inquiry of the stranger, who shook his head unsmilingly and replied in an undertone. Dumbledore nodded and gestured the man to the empty seat at his right-hand side. The stranger sat down, took his mane of grey hair out of his face, pulled a plate of sausages toward him, raised it to his left of his nose and sniffed it. He then took a small knife out of his pocket, speared a sausage on the end of it, and began to eat. His normal eye was fixed upon the sausage, but the blue eye was still darting restlessly around in its socket, taking in the hall and the students. "May I introduce you to our new defense against the dark arts teacher?" said Dumbledore brightly into the silence. "Professor Moody." It was usual for new staff members to be greeted with applause, but none of the staff or students clapped except Dumbledore and Hagrid. Both put their hands together and applauded, but the sound echoed dismally into the silence, and they stopped fairly quickly. Everyone else seemed too transfixed by Moody's bizarre appearance to do more than stare at him. "Moody?" Harry muttered to Ron. "Mad-Eye Moody? The one your dad went to help this morning?" "Must be," said Ron in a low, awed voice. "What happened to him?" Hermione whispered. "What happened to his face?" "Dunno," Ron whispered back, watching Moody with fascination. Moody seemed totally indifferent to his less-than-warm welcome. Ignoring the jug of pumpkin juice in front of him, he reached again into his travelling cloak, pulled out a hip flask, and took a very long draught from it. As he lifted his arm to drink, his cloak was pulled a few inches from the ground, and Harry saw, below the table, several inches of carved wooden leg, ending in a clawed foot. Dumbledore cleared his throat again. "As I was saying," he said, smiling at the sea of students before him, all of was still gazing transfixed at Mad-Eye Moody, "we are going to have the honour of hosting a very exciting event over the coming months, an event which has not been held for over a century. It is my very great pleasure to inform you that the Triwizard tournament will be taking place at Hogwarts this year." "You're joking," said Fred Weasley loudly. The tension that had filled the hall ever since Moody's arrival suddenly broke. Nearly everyone laughed, and Dumbledore chuckled appreciatively. "I am not joking, Mr. Weasley," he said. "Though now you mention it, I did hear an excellent one over the summer about a troll, a hag, and a leprechaun who all go into a bar." Professor McGonagall cleared her throat loudly. Perhaps this is not the time." No," said Dumbledore. "Where was I? Ah, yes, the Triwizard tournament. Well, some of you will not know what this tournament involves, so I hope those who do know will forgive me for giving a short explanation and allow their attention to wander freely. The Triwizard tournament was first established some 700 years ago as a friendly competition between the three largest European schools of wizardry, Hogwarts, Beauxbaton, and Durmstrang. A champion was selected to represent each school, and the three champions competed in 3 magical tasks. The schools took it in turns to host the tournament once every 5 years, and it was generally agreed to be a most excellent way of establishing ties between young witches and wizards of different nationalities, until the death toll mounted so high that the tournament was discontinued. "Death toll?" Hermione whispered, looking alarmed, but her anxiety did not seem to be shared by the majority of the students in the hall. Many of them were whispering excitedly with each other, and Harry himself was far more interested in hearing about the tournament than in worrying about the deaths that had happened hundreds of years ago. "There have been several attempts over the centuries to reinstate the tournament," Dumbledore continued, "none of which have been very successful. However, our own departments of international magical cooperation and magical games and sports have decided the time is ripe for another attempt. We have worked very hard over the summer to ensure this time no champion will find himself or herself in mortal danger. The heads of Beauxbaton and Durmstrang will be arriving with their shortlisted contenders in October, and the selection of the 3 champions will take place at Halloween. An impartial judge will decide which students are most worthy to compete for the Triwizard Cup, the glory of their school, and 1,000 galleons personal prize money." "I'm going for it," Fred Weasley hissed down the table, his face lit with enthusiasm at the prospect of such glory and riches. He was not the only person who seemed to be visualizing himself as Hogwarts champion. At every house table, Harry could see people either gazing raptly at Dumbledore or else whispering fervently to their neighbours. But then Dumbledore spoke again, and the hall quieted once more. "Eager though I know all of you will be to bring the Triwizard Cup to Hogwarts," he said, "the heads of the participating schools, along with the Ministry of Magic, have agreed to impose an age restriction on contenders this year. Only students who are of age, that is to say 17 years or older, will be allowed to put forward their names for consideration. This—" Dumbledore raised his voice slightly, for several people had made noises of outrage at these words. The Weasley twins were suddenly looking furious. "Is a measure we feel is necessary, given that the tournament tasks will be difficult and dangerous, whatever precautions we take, and it is highly unlikely that students below 6th and 7th year will be able to cope with them. I will personally be ensuring that no underage student hoodwinks our impartial judge into making them Hogwarts champion." His light blue eyes twinkled as they flickered over Fred and George's mutinous faces. "I therefore beg you not to waste your time submitting yourself if you are under 17. The delegations from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang will be arriving in October and remaining with us for the greater part of this year. I know that you will all extend every courtesy to our foreign guests while they are with us, and will give your wholehearted support to the Hogwarts champion when he or she is selected. And now it is late, and I know how important it is for all of you to be alert and rested as you enter your lessons tomorrow morning. Bedtime. Chop chop." Dumbledore sat down again and turned to talk to Mad-Eye Moody. There was a great scraping and banging as all of the students got to their feet and swarmed toward the double doors into the entrance hall. "They can't do that," said George Weasley, who had not joined the crowd moving toward the door, but was standing up and glaring at Dumbledore. "We're 17 in April. Why can't we have a shot?" "They're not stopping me entering," said Fred stubbornly, also scowling at the top table. "The champions will get to do all sorts of stuff you'd never be able to do normally, and 1,000 galleons prize money." "Yeah," said Ron, a faraway look in his eyes. "Yeah, 1,000 galleons." "Come on," said Hermione. "We'll be the only ones left here if you don't move." Harry, Ron, Hermione, Fred and George set off for the entrance hall, Fred and George debating the ways in which Dumbledore might stop those who were under 17 entering the tournament. "Who's this impartial judge who's going to decide who the champions are?" said Harry. "Dunno," said Fred, "but it'll be them we'll have to fool. I reckon a couple of drops of aging potion might do it, George." "Dumbledore knows you're not of age, though," said Ron. "Yeah, but he's not the one who decides who the champion is he?" said Fred shrewdly. "Sounds to me like this judge knows who wants to enter. He'll choose the best from each school, and never mind how old they are. Dumbledore's just trying to stop us giving them their names." "People have died, though," said Hermione in a worried whisper, as they walked through a door concealed behind a tapestry and started up another narrower staircase. "Yeah," said Fred airily, "but that was years ago, wasn't it? Anyway, where's the fun without a bit of risk? Hey, Ron, what if we find out how to get around Dumbledore? Fancy entering?" "What do you reckon?" Ron asked Harry. "Be cool to enter, wouldn't it? Well, I suppose they might want someone older. Don't know if we've learnt enough." "I definitely haven't," came Neville's gloomy voice behind Fred and George. "I expect my Gran would want me to try, though. She's always going on about how I should be upholding family honour. I'll just have to— Oops!" Neville's foot had sunk right through a step halfway up the staircase. There were many of these trick stairs at Hogwarts. It was second nature to most of the older students to jump this particular step, but Neville's memory was notoriously poor. Harry and Ron seized him under the armpits and pulled him out, while a suit of armour at the top of the stairs creaked and clanked, laughing wheezily. "Shut it, you!" said Ron, banging down its visor as they passed. They made their way up to the entrance of Gryffindor Tower, which was concealed behind a large portrait of a fat lady in a pink silk dress. "Password?" she said as they approached. "Balderdash," said George. "A prefect downstairs told me." The portrait swung forward to reveal a hole in the wall, through which they all climbed. A crackling fire was warming the circular common room, which was full of squashy armchairs and tables. Hermione cast the merrily dancing flames a dark look, and Harry distinctly heard her mutter, "Slave labour," before bidding them good night and disappearing through the doorway to the girls' dormitories. Harry, Ron, and Neville climbed up the last spiral staircase as they reached their own dormitory, which was situated at the top of the tower. 5 four-poster beds with deep crimson hangings stood against the walls, each with the owner's trunk at the foot. Dean and Seamus were already getting into bed. Seamus had pinned his Ireland rosette to his headboard, and Dean had tacked up a poster of Victor Crumb over his bedside table. His old poster of West Ham football team was pinned right next to it. "Mental," Ron sighed, shaking his head at the completely stationary soccer players. Harry, Ron, and Neville got into their pyjamas and into bed. Someone, a house elf no doubt, had placed warming pans between the sheets. It was extremely comfortable lying there in bed and listening to the storm raging outside. "I might go in for it, you know," Ron said sleepily through the darkness. "If Fred and George find out how to, the tournament. You never know, do you?" "Suppose not." Harry rolled over in bed. A series of dazzling new pictures formed in his mind's eye. He had hoodwinked the impartial judge into believing he was 17. He had become Hogwarts champion. He was standing in the grounds, his arms raised in triumph in front of the whole school, all of whom were applauding and screaming. He'd just won the Triwizard tournament. Cho's face stood out particularly clearly in the blurred crowd, her face glowing with admiration. Harry grinned into his pillow, exceptionally glad that Ron couldn't see what he could.
Harry definitely has a thing for Cho Chang.
Bad.
Really bad.
Really bad.
You know, it's bad when thinking about that gets his mind off the fact that there's no Quidditch this year.
Right? He doesn't even care about Quidditch anymore.
I know.
Nope.
A year without Quidditch. Imagine if Woods had one more year left in him.
If Oliver... Oh my god, he'd lose his mind.
Right? If they came out
He
and
wouldn't
said
even
no
care.
Quidditch this year.
He wouldn't even care. He wouldn't even care about the tournament. He'd just be like, You still can't cancel Quidditch. What? Excuse me?
You can't cancel
He'd
Quidditch.
have like a brain aneurysm or something. He'd lose his mind.
Oh, that would be great, just to witness his reaction to all that.
Right? So there you go.
That's it. Triwizard Tournament.
Yep.
And finally learned how they made the food.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember if we talked about that on camera, but off camera I was asking.
I think we talked about it at one point because we were talking... We did have that conversation about how you can't magically, like, make food.
Yeah.
And then you were asking, well, their food just appears on their plates. How does it do that?
Dumbledore just magically makes food appear.
Right.
How does that happen?
Right.
Apparently he just teleports it from kitchen to table.
Or the house elves do it. Like, you know how Dobby does the thing with the pudding? Like, maybe the house elves
Well, yeah, but
it.
don't they always say with, like, a wave of Dumbledore's wand, all the food appears or something?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Usually Dumbledore doing it, or
Yeah,
doing some motion.
true.
Or maybe he's telling the house elves, make the food appear. Do it.
Right, right.
I don't know how that works, but Dumbledore has something to do with it.
Either way,
Either way,
it's the house elves.
it's the house elves.
And Hermione is pissed about it.
Mm-hmm. We definitely set up the characters' conflicts. Ron's is the whole being poor thing and how he hates the fact that his family doesn't have money. Hermione's super against the use of house elves.
And not paying them for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And now she knows that Hogwarts is the largest dwelling of house elves in Britain.
Yeah. Yeah. You would think a little bit more.
Yeah.
More of Hogwarts than to use slave labor, but I guess not. Be interesting to see how that goes down. But apparently house elves don't want to be paid.
Except for Dobby.
Except for Dobby.
Because he's a weirdo.
I mean, I guess Hogwarts wouldn't be too bad, depending on who is, like, in charge of them.
Like who the headmaster is at the time?
Yeah. Not to say that it's right, I'm just saying, like, as opposed to living with
Malfoy.
Or even,
Crouch.
yes, thank you. I was going to say Crumb. It wasn't Crumb. Crouch.
Crouch, Crumb, whoever.
Living with Crouch. Pretty cushy gig, you know? Get to live in a castle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you just, like, you have a job.
Yeah.
Like, the house elves that take care of the fires probably just do, like, the household things. The house elves in the kitchens probably just cook.
Yeah.
It's not like they have to do all of it, and they have to... They're also not getting beaten up or having to, like, beat themselves up.
Allegedly. We don't know that. We just found out. It all depends on who's in charge of them.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, if Filch is the one in charge of them, I'm guessing their time isn't too great.
That's true. That's true. I don't know. I guess maybe we'll just find out more information at some point.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Like I said, I think Hermione's really going to look into it a little bit more.
Yeah, Hermione's pissed. She's pissed. She's salty. She is not happy about this at all.
Well, wouldn't you be?
No, if I were Hermione, I'd be losing my mind. I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me right now?
Mm-hmm.
What? Hogwarts uses slave labor? Dumbledore allows this? What?
Right? And I'm going to assume Hogwarts is pretty well off. Though we did have that discussion about who pays for Hogwarts. Where do they get their funding? Or maybe that's why they have the Sorcerer's Stone. Or Philosopher's Stone. Depending on which book you read. Because it can turn any material into gold. So maybe that's why they have it. They're just out there just... doop, doop, doop.
No, I think it's centuries and centuries of amassing wealth. I think it's families making donations like any other school.
Well, yeah. The Malfoys.
I also can't confirm this, but I think I read something about how there's also like a Hogwarts fund for kids who can't afford to go to Hogwarts. Like the school pays for them to go there.
Oh, so they do pay. It's not a free thing.
I can't confirm that that's actually canon.
Okay.
So I don't know. That's something we will have to...
Because we had that discussion. It is in the UK, and... Correct me if I'm wrong, but... They did have free school. In the UK, in the 90s at least. I think you might have to pay over there now. I don't know.
But Hogwarts
I'm pretty sure
is
they
like
had universal education.
But Hogwarts is like a boarding school.
That is true. It's like private.
Yeah.
So yeah, is Harry paying for this? Or is it just...
It's never mentioned.
That's what I mean. It's curious.
I'll have to look into that, because I don't want to say yes, no...
Oh, someone in the comments will know.
Someone will know. That's what I mean. I want to look it up, but I feel like somebody probably knows whether or not what I'm saying is right or what. But
that's what I said. Correct us if we're wrong. We want to know.
Yeah.
We know one of you out there knows. If not, a lot of you.
Do you pay to go to Hogwarts? I don't know.
And then called it Mad Eye Moody.
It's Defense Against
the Dark Arts.
Yeah, you called it. It was pretty obvious.
Yeah, it was.
She didn't. J.K. Rowling did not hide that at all. It's pretty wide out there.
So he already seems pretty creepy. So I'm going to say there's something wrong with him.
There's something wrong.
He's not going to last another year, is he?
I don't know.
It's another one and done.
Hey, he's a wizard pirate. Remember we had that conversation about wizard pirates? I know we talked about this. There was we had some conversation where we were like, wizard pirates, but I don't... If you did this and this, would you get a wizard pirate? I don't remember what the conversation was, but he's a wizard pirate.
He's a wizard pirate.
He has a wooden leg and his weird eyeball. It's not a patch, but it's close.
That's awesome.
He's a
wizard pirate.
He's a wizard pirate.
Be
He's
even
also a
better
dark
if
wizard
it...
catcher. That was his job.
Yeah.
So what better?
I wonder why he's there now after the Dark Mark appeared.
Maybe he's like the best choice to teach the kids. He used to catch dark wizards. Who would know better?
Yeah, obviously. He would be a very good candidate. But the fact that he was a dark wizard catcher... It's a little bit of security at the school, I think.
Yeah. Someone who has a nose for trouble.
Yeah. And if any dark wizards happen to show up, might be able to...
just take care of that.
Yeah. Or it might just be the fact that Sirius infiltrated it. And we all know Dumbledore is cool with it, but everyone else still thinks that he's a dark wizard.
Yeah, that's
evil,
true.
working for Voldemort.
I know. Poor Sirius. Will his name ever get cleared?
I'm going to say yes. Well,
Hashtag Buckbeak lives. Hashtag
free
exonerate Sirius. Clear his name.
It'd be really cool if Mad-Eye Moody had the peg leg, but his peg leg was his wand.
Oh, and he just, like, does magic with his foot, his leg. I love that it ends in a clawed foot, too. I just think that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I don't know.
I know. It's just, I'm thinking of that meme where the guy's like, oh my god, call an ambulance. And then he stands up with a gun, but not for me. That'd be Mad-Eye Moody. Voldemort, oh no, call an ambulance. Not for me. Just hopping on one leg.
Oh, that's great. So who do you think the Hogwarts champion's gonna be?
I don't know. Because I want to say Harry, but I think that's just the obvious choice out of all of them.
Because
he's Harry
Potter. It is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire.
And age restrictions and rules and all that don't apply to him whatsoever.
Dumbledore did say he will personally be making sure that no one underage can put their name in to the impartial judge.
Yeah, I thought so, and which is why I kind of didn't understand why Fred and George thought they could get past him.
They're just very angry, and they're like, screw him, we're gonna do it anyway, we're gonna figure it out.
I know, they say that Dumbledore isn't the one choosing them, but Dumbledore is gonna be like, who'd you choose? Fred and George? Fred, George.
Well,
leave.
Maybe Dumbledore's gonna do some, like, protective magic.
Yeah, maybe. That could be it, too.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I do know, but I don't know.
I'm sure there's some spell that he could do to do that, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. They've definitely set up some little conflict action going on. Ron's having some big-time insecurity issues that he needs to work on.
So is the Triwizard Cup gonna be where Voldemort makes his move?
What do you mean?
Well, Voldemort said that he couldn't do what he wanted to do till after the Quidditch World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Triwizard tournament seems like a good in. People are coming from outside of school, intercept.
You think he's going to use the tournament to his advantage to make a move?
Oh, yeah. Especially because we have a kid coming from the school. It starts with a D. Durmstrang. Yeah, where they pretty much still teach the dark arts.
Interesting. Also, can I just say, foreign wizards! Yay! Exciting!
Yeah, that's cool. I am interested to see. But I want to know about the Durmstrang wizards.
He doesn't care about the French witches and wizards at all. Like, I don't care about Beauxbatons. Whatever.
They're just filler.
They're just filler.
They're like no offense, they're the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs of the story.
You think it's all about these Durmstrang people?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. That's funny. Oh, man.
Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs are just mentioned here and there. Just like I think it's going to be with the French wizards.
Apologies to any Ravenclaws or Hufflepuffs out there if you think we're being insensitive.
I'm not being insensitive. I'm telling you is written in the story.
I know, but
J.K. Rowling is being insensitive to the Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws.
Listen, Cedric Diggory is a Hufflepuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's, like, in the story.
I agree, but he's never, like, the main component.
Cho Chang is a Ravenclaw.
They ran... Yeah, okay, one love interest, but again, it's just... Harry admires her from afar. It's never about Ravenclaw. Or even Cedric Diggory. He played against him once. He was there for a chapter. And then he was again there for another chapter in this book. And will we hear from him again? Probably not.
Oh. Okay.
I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying that Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff have been severely underrepresented in these stories so far. It has always been Harry and Gryffindor.
And the Slytherins.
Because always them back and forth with the House Cup.
I know.
And even with the Quidditch Cup, it's always Slytherin. Not Ravenclaw. Slytherin, Gryffindor, Slytherin.
I know, it's the rivalry thing. I get it. Oh, this is so funny. I'll be very careful about some of the stuff I say, though. I want to say stuff, but I gotta,
Are they gonna...
I'll...
Are more houses going to be, better represented throughout the stories?
Do you really want me to answer that question? I don't know if I should answer that question.
You can just say, yes, they'll be better represented. You don't have to tell me,
Yes.
Okay. I'm just saying. We really haven't learned much about the other houses. We know a lot about Slytherin House. Honestly, we know more about Slytherin House than we do Gryffindor. Even.
I know, right? I know.
Even Gryffindor is kind of second.
Yeah, because it's all about the history of Slytherin because of the heir of Slytherin and all of that stuff. So yeah, you definitely get more information about Slytherin, I think.
Yeah. I'd say so far we know the most about Slytherin, a little bit about Gryffindor, and then Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff are, like I said, just kind of mentioned.
They're just there.
Yeah.
There's incidental Hufflepuff characters like Ernie Macmillan and Justin Finch Fletchley. They were Hufflepuffs. They were represented. Justin Finch oh god, that kid's name every time. Justin Finch Fletchley.
Justin Finch. Oh, I thought it was Flinch.
Finch Fletchley.
Justin Finch Fletchley.
Yeah, he thought Harry attacked him, and there was that whole thing. That happened. He was a Hufflepuff. And then Ernie Macmillan was talking mad shit about Harry with Hannah Abbott.
Yeah, but it goes back to the whole thing where it's these characters are just mentioned for a chapter, and it's never anything about the houses themselves.
No.
It's always just, this person did this, who happens to be in Ravenclaw, or happens to be in Hufflepuff.
Alright.
And then we don't hear about them again.
Alright, fair enough.
So I have nothing against the houses.
But
I'm just saying that...
But there's also characters that...
And I'd also like to say we don't help this stigma whatsoever, considering our shirts.
Hey, we did kind of choose.
Even on this...
But we didn't choose.
Even on this channel, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff are not represented enough.
Half of our audience are Ravenclaws, I feel like. Half of the people on our chat are Ravenclaws.
That's true.
If anything...
Same with our Discord, pretty much everyone's Ravenclaw.
Right. Vladimir is the only other Slytherin that we got, and I don't even know if there's any...
There's one more.
Is there one more?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Vladimir's the only one I remember.
I'll have to double check who it was, but...
I know.
I think I'm pretty sure I know who it is, but I don't want to say the name and...
Either way, most of our audience are Ravenclaws.
I feel like we gotta get something like a little Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff banner to put back here or something.
Just to spice it up a little bit.
Something for the other houses.
See, I think it should just all be Slytherin.
Wow.
What?
I'm over here trying to make everything as equal as possible, and you're just like, screw all the other houses. It's on you, not Martha's.
Slytherin, that's where it's at. I mean, We're reading the Slytherin edition book.
Anyways, a chapter.
Yeah, anything else about the chapter?
No, that was about it.
Just for a second, just one.
Well, Colin Creevey's little brother.
I was just gonna talk about that.
He's something. He's like Colin Creevey with ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah. He fell in the lake, and something put him back in the boat.
Yeah, see, that's nightmare fuel for me.
He's just like, it happened, something picked me up and put me back. He was like, all about it. It was great.
Like, I freak out when I'm in the water and I feel like a fish or something brush up. It doesn't even have to be a fish. It can be
like
a leaf or a plant brush up against my leg, and I freak out if I can't see it. Imagine something so big it just lifts you up.
It puts you back in the boat. He's definitely a Gryffindor.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he was not scared of that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Did not freak him out even a little bit.
Yeah. Definitely not Hufflepuff, because Hufflepuff would be freaking out. And definitely not Ravenclaw. So Ravenclaw would be smart enough to know that's not right. And then Slytherins haven't shown too much bravery so far. So.
Just gonna not say anything. Except, just you wait, sir.
I will.
Yes, you will.
For the next chapter, which is...
Mad-Eye Moody.
Mad-Eye Moody. So join us next time for Mad-Eye Moody. Right here on Bibliobabuli.